Most people think to stand out in this business, you need to be the first one on top of the story or the person with the loudest voice or the biggest ratings. In truth, to stand out in the news business, you just need to ask the right questions and demand the right answers.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to iNews TweetLines Plus. This is the next edition. And it's official. Trump said, as they're calling it. Trump wins. Now, ironically enough, this is 4:12 in the morning here. I'm still up, I'm still watching it. I've got 3 or 4 channels I'm watching at the same time. That's kind of the way it goes with research. And you have multiple sources, multiple viewings at the exact same time, and you're sort of switching back and forth between the two, or sometimes, you know, trying to listen to all 3 or 4 or whatever you have all at the same time. So, that's just the way things go. One of the things I found that this is for Bernie Sanders supporters, for people who consider themselves anti-establishment like I do. I'm actually anti-establishment. I'm an individualist. I'm not part. I don't want to be part of the establishment. I don't want to be part of the mainstream society. I'm happy being out on the fringes. This is why my channel is the way it is. You look at my channel, and say, well, I'm not partnered, I'm all by myself, and that's because I'm not part of the mainstream. You know, my channel doesn't have the popularity of Alex Jones. I'm not the Glenn Beck. I'm not RT at all. And the reason is because I want to be anti-establishment. I want to be able to bring issues and ideas forward that are typically not talked about within the mainstream. That's not acceptable to be talked about within the mainstream. And this is what Donald Trump, and the thing is, the reason why I watch RT is I want to understand what the left is doing. I want to understand what the progressives are thinking about. And RT actually does a pretty good job. They actually, unlike what they call the mainstream media, which are primarily left, they don't leave things out really. They do have their points where they have filters that are pretty left-oriented, but if they have enough in there that you can go take their information, source it out, and say, okay, here's what they've left out, here's what they haven't left out. The American media is a little more complex than that because they're devious about what they're hiding because they were working with the government, they're working with the Clintons. It was very difficult to sort of move through these filters and try to find out what's what. And so it was more difficult to sort of decode the American mainstream as compared to decoding RT. RT was a much easier climb than was American mainstream media. Now, ironically enough, the left, the Republicans called it the liberal left media, which is mainstream, and of course the people on RT call it the corporate media. Right? Each has their own particular side of things. And you saw anchors talking about Donald Trump's win. I saw it now as it's starting to sink in. You saw them crying. Crying for the loss of Hillary Clinton. They, oh, what's going to happen next? But at the same time, still admitting to themselves, as hard as it was, that Trump did win the anti-establishment vote. And one of the people who was doing reporting on the street for RT talked to the people in the street of New York, and I said, who were the people who swung a lot of the votes over? They were the Bernie Sanders supporters. They were the people who wanted something different, who wanted anti-establishment, but was let down by Bernie Sanders when he capitulated to Hillary Clinton. He could have fought Hillary Clinton. He could have taken this to the voter. He could have taken that voter fraud to court, but they didn't do anything. He rolled over. And this is what I talked about before. How the socialists typically roll over. And this is not. And then this is even Trump said this in his speech. This is not the end. This is the beginning. And what's going to happen now? And he must be well aware of this. Is things are not going to stay this way for long. There's going to be reforming of politics. And now you're going to see a lot of different players tackling and moving in for a spot. And this is where the anti-establishment, like myself, we now have to get up and get the job done. The hard work now is just beginning. Our work now to end the wars, to stop the bloodshed from regime change. Trump says he's not for regime change anymore. He's been on the record like this since back with the first Iraq War, or with the Iraq War itself, under George W. Bush. He said he wasn't for it. Right? You could see it actually on Sean Hannity. If this is the case, he's consistent in his message. Then it should be that we should be able to start ending these wars, these interventions, these regime changes. But that's going to happen though. The UN establishment, including the establishment who is part of the Republican Party, they're going to push back very hard, and we have to support Trump and say, "Hey, don't forget us. We're the ones who put you in office. We're the ones who say, hey, you got to stick to, let's get out of these interventionist wars. Let's get out of regime change. Because he says he's the best negotiator there is. Fine. If he's the best negotiator there is, then there's no reason why we can't negotiate our way out of dictatorships around the world. Let's negotiate with them. If he's such a good negotiator, he should be, instead of using war, this is where the negotiation skills come in. And so this is an opportunity now for real change. I mean, this is what I was hoping for. In many cases, this is what I was praying for. And yes, I am a Christian. But a lot of people don't understand that Christians, the Christ, the original Christ, because there's two different Christs in the world. The Christ that most people know from the papacy and the Western Christianity is a warmonger. They have just war. They're just like the Islamic jihadis. The Roman Catholic Church had a jihad, the Crusades, that lasted well over 700 years. So they can't say, oh, we're different than the Islamic jihad. And they don't say they're different than the Islamic jihad. This is why you have a lot of the Islamic people being brought in to the United States like this, even at a risk to the U.S. security. Why? Why do they bring them all in? Because they understand that they're all the same. And this is why you have a lot of these people in the churches saying, hey, we're all the same, we all believe the same God. Right, they all believe in a war God. But you go back to the original Christ, you actually sit down and read the gospel, you'll find that Christ was anti-establishment, that he did not support what the Jewish authorities were doing. And this is why he was crucified. He sat down and said, yeah, not only do I disagree with what the Jewish authority does, you don't need the authority. He's saying, you don't need the authority anymore. And I'm saying this not as me, Jesus Christ, the average person. I'm Jesus Christ, God. So this was God saying, the Jewish establishment, the established authorities of the Jews, the Pharisees, weren't needed. And that there was a direct relationship between Christ and people. Direct relationship between God and his people. And the thing is, we weren't. If you read the beginning of the Gospel of John, what you will find is that there is a calling of Christ in the Gospel of John that calls us become adopted sons, adopted children of God. In other words, we are not to be simply his people, a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, of the kingdom of heaven. We are supposed to become his sons, his children. This is the things we are to work towards. So this is not a God who is far away, who requires a pope to intercede on our behalf, who says, the Pope himself states that he is the replacement for Christ on earth. He is the vicar of Christ on earth, which in Greek translates to Antichrist. Antis, the word antis, means to take the place of. And that's what the word vicarious, which is Latin for take the place of. Vicarious, vicar, and antis are the same word. They're synonymous. And so when you begin to understand the original Christ, not the Western Christ, you see him as anti-establishment. You see the philanthropy. You see the care there. You see the real charity. And this is what we have to work towards. If we want a better world, and again, it's we, the anti-establishment, must step forward and take the responsibility that we were calling for. Democracy is not about what the government does for us. It's about what we do as individuals, as the anti-establishment. It's what we do that counts and makes the difference. And so that's why now, with the end of the establishment, and most of Europe is crying about this because the establishment is now over, and they don't understand real democracy. Real democracy means that we, the individual, get up and do the work. We do not expect of the government to do X, Y, and Z. We get up and do X, Y, and Z. So hopefully Bernie Sanders supporters, individualists, anti-establishment people, real activists, people who want to be real activists but not really bullshit artists, like the activists we've seen so far out of the Clinton administration and the establishment. If you want to do something that's real, this is your time now to step forward. Do not wait for the government to get up and do the work for you. And this is what you're going to be seeing here on this channel. We are not simply going to step back and say, oh, this should be done and that. We are not going to be the high-priced or the consultant that simply, we just simply bring the ideas. We don't actually do anything. That's not what this channel is. We're here to make this provoke, inform, and change. This is the job of INN. This is what we're doing here, and this is what's at the end, and then sometimes if the video is long enough, in between the various different parts of the video. Anyways, this is short. It's at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning now, and it's time for me to have something to eat and maybe get a little sleep. We'll see what happens between tonight and now and when the sun comes up again, probably around 7 o'clock in the morning. So about 3 hours from now, we'll see what ends up happening. Anyways, see you in the next edition of TweetLines Plus. All right, bye.
INN. Provoke, inform, and change. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Welcome to the library, and I am the librarian. I am the professor. And professor of what? Professor of physics.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
Free speech rules here at Democratic Earth.